One thing I've learned, if you don't hold their feet to the fire, everybody gets burned.
Hold on. Before you start waving around that freedom of speech thing, when you're in a crowded movie theater and you scream fire, you better be able to smell smoke. If you come on this radio show and you start saying incondescent things like that, you better have more behind you, pal, than just your thumb. I've been listening to talk radio for years, and one thing I just can't stand is when the host has to, push his way onto people, beat the callers into his way of thinking, extending his ego, or when the callers call in and say something so outrageous and the host lets it go unchallenged. The sign you're on the road to truth is the lack of contradiction. You want to find truth, you just don't simply believe somebody because of their authority or their degree, or you listen to what they say, you test it against reality, and you hold their feet to the fire. We are back and we are live. Feet to the fire. I'm your host, James Yanchik, the Black Knight of Talk Radio. I've been doing a show now a couple weeks. A lot of stuff that's going on in the world, especially in this country, having to do with the vax and the virus and tyranny and all that. A lot of people are covering, doing a good job, and there's probably overkill of it. I've been talking about it when it seemed to cross paths with some kind of, principle or some spiritual principle or something like that. And I've talked a lot about it in the past. Today, though, what I've been doing now for weeks is I'm thinking okay, we're potentially going into the last days. If we're not, it's the closest it's been in all through history. And the most important principles based on that, if it is the last days, then there are certain principles I think we should be working on. I should be working on. Put it that way. And I'm just sharing. All right. So I don't want to say judgmentally, but I'm saying here's what I think I should be working on, learning these principles. And that's what I've been doing. I've been talking a lot about Jesus' words. And to give a brief intro here, what I've done is I've taken Jesus' words as being the most authority and worked my way down. I don't equate the whole Bible equally. I don't think the Bible is, quote, the Word of God. Though I think it contains the words of God, it contains the principles of God, and it contains truth, and therefore it's rather important. But it's also incumbent on us to understand what's being said, what the principles are, and follow them. And so this is what I've been doing for, I guess, since 97, as I've been using my phrase, the lack of contradiction, to go through these things. Hey, there's this denomination, this denomination seems to conflict on this verse. Why? Find out what it means, resolve the conflict in myself, and compare it to other principles, and it all gels. It takes time. Okay, I'm going to sneeze now, of course, because I'm starting live. All right, I'm just going to disappear on a moment's notice to sneeze. So this is what I've been doing, and as I learn these things, they help me understand the Jesus Christian principles and to follow them with the grace and help of God, praying to the Father for guidance and power to overrule the sinful, arrogant, selfish obstacles that are in myself, let alone those around me. So I was thinking about this verse for a couple of weeks now. Let me just start here. So Jesus is teaching. He said this twice in Matthew, and a less terse, more terse way in Mark. But after he's talking in these two cases, once is about if your brother sins, go tell him his fault, blah, blah, blah. The other context is, I say this to you, Peter, upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overpower it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom. And in both cases, they say, very interesting phrase, whatever you bind on earth shall have been bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall have been loosed in heaven. And he said the exact same statement is being recorded earlier in Matthew at a different time. I tell you, whatever you bind on earth shall have been bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall have been loosed in heaven. Now, that shall have is very interesting. And in the NASB version, which I tend to use, they painstakingly in translating try to get the points of the Greek and Hebrew into English, which is hard to do, and it's not perfect. But they do a great job. It's sometimes clumsy to read, which is why people don't like to use that as a kind of a poetic prose reading. But it's accurate. And I found those words that kind of stick out, and even though I was already kind of done with this, sent me on a little bit further. Shall have been bound in heaven. Very interesting. And when I wanted to look up, I looked up in the Greek interlinear to try and find out any kind of nuances that I can do. Again, the NASB does a great job. But the idea of bound or bind, it goes into, the idea of something prohibited, or if you're going to be in this definition, then you will do or not do these things, right? So, for that matter, if you're a football player, you can't face mask the guy. Right? You're bound to that rule if you want to play in the NFL or whatever. So the idea is that if you're a Christian, there are certain things that you are bound to be. You can't be a wanton murderer for fun and be a Christian, for example. So there's that idea of binding, and loosing would be to allow. We'll allow this action. If you're going to be a member of our group, we're going to allow this action. And the group being the greater, at this point, I'm talking about the greater Christianity. But it's interesting because it says, what you shall loose, like present kind of tense, which you shall do, or future, I should say, what you're going to do, has already been loosed in heaven. And I'm thinking like, wow, that just blew me away. It's like, so if we decide to do this, does it become that in heaven? That's what I thought. And I'm thinking that's what I was kind of concerned with. The idea of that, did Jesus give men, either Peter, as the Catholic tradition would say, or the disciples, as a more broad tradition would say, or even humans, have they given the power to make spiritual rules on earth, and then they will become okay in heaven? Which, it kind of sounds like a Satanist dream, So by looking at the tense of that in Greek, and it gets very, I'm not a Greek scholar, I don't even play one on the radio, but I do look into this stuff, and when it's that kind of phraseology, it's said in a strong sense. You shall lose, and the word "shall" in English is a word that they choose because "shall" is like, kind of like an absolute thing. You shall. It's not you might, maybe, I'll try. You shall, right? You shall loose. What you shall loose on heaven shall have been loosed. Earth shall have been loosed in heaven. So that's very interesting, because as you look across all the denominations from independent to Catholic, Eastern Orthodox, whether it be Greek or Russian, you have the Church of England, broke away from together. You have the whole Protestant array of flavors, from Lutherans to Baptists to Presbyterians to Methodists. You have the predestinational groups. You have the free will salvation groups. You have all of these people coming from the same Bible. And when, and in one of the verses it says, and I say again to you, he repeats himself, of common trait of Jesus is to say it again, if not in a different way, but saying the same thing. So it's kind of like really laying it home. And again, I say to you, if two of you agree on earth about anything that they may ask, it shall be done for them by my Father who is in heaven. But I say again to you. So by binding and loosing, it's agreeing on what's binding and loosing, and it shall be done for them. Kind of not an exact. It's kind of a tangential addition onto it. So that's pretty important, because like, what if you're a Baptist, and if you look at the doctrines of a Baptist, of course there are several different Baptist groups and that split, and you look at a Catholic, let's say, or Eastern Orthodox, who's right? Because if they agree and it's made already done in heaven, well, after thinking about this, I kind of came up with an idea. I'm going to go through some of the things that I have, verses that came to me, and I had to look them up because I didn't know where they were. But it's funny that when it says, whatever you loose in earth will have already been loosed in heaven. To me, that gives an idea of that if you agree upon it, the reason why you're agreeing upon it is because this principle is already there. So if you're on earth and you don't have this principle, you agree on this because it's already been there and now it's here. As in heaven, as earth as it is in heaven. So it has an idea of being like, well, whatever you people agree upon, the agreement is going to be Holy Spirit working in all of you, and the fact that you agree on it and you fine-tuned it, well, that's already been loosed in heaven. It's already, you're not doing nothing new. It may be new on earth, not new in heaven. That's one aspect of this. And Jesus was accused by the Pharisees of, basically preaching a new way. He's coming up with a new religion, if you will. I mean, if you look at Judaism and Christianity, are two religions. And you have the Old and New Testament. Right in that, you have the idea of the old and the new, a new way. So what Jesus was teaching didn't jive with what the Pharisees and the others have agreed upon. So they bound on earth. So did it loose in heaven? Jesus gave this authority to the disciples. Now, you could take it legalistically and simply and go like, well, he didn't have the authority, they do. Well, if you read church history, it's pretty messed up, right? There are human beings, there are sinners, there are people who aren't Christians in the church and otherwise. There are people of ignorance, there's superstition, and then there's the old standby traditions of men. So you have this aspect. But Jesus said, truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter or stroke of the letter of the law shall pass from the law, skipping ahead, until all is accomplished. Therefore, one who nullifies the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same, he should be called the least in heaven. But others who keep them and teach them shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I say to you, unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. So if we look at this and say that, well, he's saying the law, he's saying the law is valid. He says he's come to fulfill the law. It's another verse. I've not come to nullify but fulfill it. And so now you have these isolated pieces that seem to trouble each other. And let me go farther too, because there's more. Because Jesus then judged the scribes and Pharisees. And let me give you this deal. What do you describe? You got to read Matthew 23. just the whole cap. It's just great. And it's this, take the Pharisees out and put, quote, Christians in there. And you can rewrite that to address our things. And you can do it in general to other religions too. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites. Hypocrites, big word, remember. For you tithe mint and dill and cumin. Those are little small spices. So they give away 1/10 of their spices. Excuse me. And then you neglect the weightier provisions of the law, justice and mercy and faithfulness. But these things you should have done without neglecting the others. So he's saying it's okay to tithe the mint, dill, and cumin. You can do that. That's fine. That's not. You might say, well, that's crazy. No, he's saying that's cool. You want to do that, fine. But you should have done justice, mercy, and faithfulness as well. So, on the subject of hypocrites, because I'm building a formula here on working on this binding. In Matthew 23, there's a 23:13 is a great line. But woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, and hypocrites, because you shut the kingdom of heaven in front of people, for you do not enter it yourselves, nor do you allow those who are entering to go in. There you have the binding on earth, binding on heaven. So why is Jesus mad with the Pharisees? Because not only are they hypocrites, and not only are they missing the actual real law and are focusing on the stuff that they have added on to it, but they are also shutting the kingdom in front of the people. They're not entering it, nor are they allowing those to enter it. So now you have this, again, binding on earth, loosing in heaven, loosing on earth, binding in heaven. Binding, loosing, loosening. So you see the Pharisees binding on earth, binding in heaven, and people aren't getting into the kingdom of heaven because they're following what they're saying and they're coming up short. And this we go back to Matthew 5:20. For I say to you, unless your righteousness far surpasses that of the scribes and Pharisees, you not enter the kingdom. So now we're getting a picture here. We have the Pharisees binding on earth, binding in heaven, and because of people following their bindings, they're actually missing the kingdom of heaven. Now, I did a whole workup on kingdom of heaven. That's not a question of heaven and hell. And I can get into that again if you'd like, but I got a whole mess of work done on that. This is your quality of life in heaven, which may include hell. If you're missing the kingdom of heaven, maybe, but it might not necessarily be. You might be thrust out of the kingdom, but not into traditional hell. I don't want to get sidetracked on that because people might start focusing on that and go, wait a minute, missed the point here. We can always get back to that. And so, what is the law? Jesus talked about them with their drinking and their cups. In fact, if you look at 23, it goes through a whole list. They do their deeds be noticed by other people. They broaden their collars and lengthen their tassels to look holy. They like the home places where they go. They like to be called rabbi and special names. They do all these things. They have the laws about not eating on the Sabbath or doing work on the Sabbath. You recall that the verse where Jesus was going to heal somebody and they said it was unlawful to heal on the Sabbath, and then he kind of cut loose on them. You're missing the point of the law. So what is the law? Is it all those dietary restrictions and all of those other things? Because it does talk about this. If you look at Matthew 23, it goes into, it's really long for me to sit and read it all, but it goes into, they have cups and plates that are washed. They do all these special things, and they were criticizing Jesus and the apostles for not doing that. And that's when he said, you have the doctrines of men. You neglect the work on the doctrines of men. You skip the principles of God, of that. So they asked him, well, what is it? In fact, I think it's in this Mark. Let me go back a little bit. I'll say 15, just for context. I'm saying it out loud. I died even. No, that was a different one. Okay, but that's another verse. I'll look for it, toss it in there, but you probably are aware of it. So they asked him, well, what are the laws? What's the greatest of the laws? Jesus says, foremost, hear, Israel, Lord is your God. The Lord is one. You shall love your Lord God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this, ye shall love your neighbor as yourself, for there is no greater commandments than these. And then the listener, this one scribe, said, you've spoken well. To love with all your heart and all understanding and all your strength, and love one's neighbor as oneself, is much more than all the burnt offerings and sacrifices. Those things were created outside of God. And I know it says, it gives laws in Exodus, Leviticus. This is where the concept comes in that some of that stuff has come from the Babylonians when they were capitalized there. And you have to look at the book, again, not to get into a side tangent, but look at the book Holy Virus. Look at holyvirus.com. You could see all the stuff. I got shows I've done on them with Lionel. This is where the idea is that certain things were saying. And Jesus was setting the record straight, knowing that these corruptions that were put in there, in the laws, have coming and saying he's not changing the laws. He's fulfilling the actual real laws that have more, that have been circumvented and ignored by the traditions. Yeah, here's the 8 woes. It's called. Man, woe to scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you travel around on land and sea to make one proselyte, one convert, or follower, and when he becomes one, you make him twice the son of hell as yourself. That's pretty strong stuff. The dill, I already did the dill and the cumin. Here's the woe scribe of the Pharisees, you hypocrites, you clean the outside of the cup and the dish, but the inside is full of robbery and self-indulgence, referring to the inside of you. Your whitewashed tombs, on the outside appear beautiful, but inside dead men's bones. I mean, this is like in your face stuff, So here's another one. Don't presume that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. They didn't come to abolish but fulfill. So in recapping what the plates that I've put up in the air, you have Jesus saying to the apostles, Peter in one instance, and then in a broader context in another, what you bind in heaven will already be bound in heaven, in earth. We already bound in heaven, and what you loose on earth shall have been loosed in heaven. So that you get the thing like, okay, when you agree to do something for spiritual discipline and what have you in your church or group or whatever, you agree on it. You can say that perhaps because you all agree on it, and if it goes cross-denominational especially, there's a lot of people agreeing on it, well then it's already true in heaven, and you're simply introducing it into earth. But there's two aspects of it. Does that, what you're introducing, does it take away from the law, which will never pass away? Loving your neighbor as yourself, loving God with all your whole might and soul. Given the examples that Jesus said, what does that do? Who's your neighbor? You have the Good Samaritan verses you're talking about. So you have these examples of what that is. So you make your agreements, you agree on them. Does it circumvent or put in the background some of the actual laws put out by God? 10 Commandments, what have you, those basic type of things. So does it do that? And also the second part we see is hypocrites. So if you agree that this should be done, and you've tested it to see that it doesn't contradict or put a shadow over the principles taught, and we're saying Jesus now because Jesus came by to make things right, to bring it back to where it was, and he retaught the principles that are the ones that count. So if it doesn't contradict them, are you following it? So you could say that you're a particular denomination and that you agree that what they have said is valid, or at least you're binding yourself to it. Well, are you doing it? In a very interesting quote, Jesus says here in the beginning of Matthew 23 says, "The scribes and Pharisees have seated themselves in the chair of Moses, therefore lawgivers there. Therefore, whatever they tell you, do and comply with it all. But do not do," meaning follow the actions of the Pharisees, "for they say things and do not do them." So the other thing you have to do is, are you following that? If you're a Catholic, you follow the Catholic traditions. You don't do some and say, well, I'm a Catholic because I was born Catholic. You follow it, or you don't, or you follow something else. You go to another. You have to, if you agree of what you're following is true, and you've checked it for validity against the principal laws, are you doing them? Because I maintain from what I'm reading that Jesus talked about hypocrisy a million times. Just do a word search on hypocrisy, and it's just all over the place. That even hypocrisy seems to be more important than what you are following, provided it doesn't violate the principles of God. And it says right here in this verse, Matthew 23, Moses says, "Therefore do what they tell you to do and comply with it all." Even though one might look at it and say, well, I don't want to do that. It's not that important. Well, then if it isn't, then align yourself with the principles that are, and then follow them. Don't just say them. Don't just ignore some. You know, there's a big battle going on now about abortion. And you have people such as the president and others who are Catholics saying it's okay for abortion when it's been a principle forever for Catholics. No. And I hate to use abortion example because it's such a hot topic, but, you know, if it is okay in your church, is aborting a child, is that coincide with the principal laws of God? And if it doesn't, you have to remove yourself from that group and find a group or be solo and read the Bible and come up with your own principles that you see are in there. And it does talk about where two get together and agree. So there is a desire to have people of liked agreements together, and they're bouncing it off each other. You're talking, well, you know, you're checking for validity. And I would also add in here that your desire or your own personal like tradition or history or preference can't take a higher position. So it's like, well, I like this. And I know it's not in there. I know it's not important, but I like it. Well, if it doesn't contradict or overshadow the principles that have been taught, no harm. You know, like writing. If you have a church service and a certain thing, you get up and you sing a hymn. You have, you know, some Bible verses, sing another hymn. You have the sermon. You have no problem. You don't have to do one first and the other. I mean, it doesn't. You know. But if you're in a group that does it that way, you may say, I'd like to change it, blah, blah, blah. And they say, no, well, go along with it. If you're going to be mad about it, then there's a problem in your heart. Do what they say, unless it's a problem, or leave. So, I mean, the part I'm getting at this, though, you know, what does this apply to me? How am I looking at it? Is that if you have a criticism of a different church or what they do, you don't go there. I mean, it's like that, whatever it is, you don't do it, but you do it for the right reasons. I don't want to go to church because I don't want to go to church. Not a good reason. I can't find one that fits along with me, possible, provided the real reason is I don't want to go there. You know what I'm saying? They talk about the Sabbath. One of the things that's different from Judaism and Christianity is the Sabbath. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy? Well, I'm not so sure that concept was, none of them has been overwritten. When you go into the law of Moses, when you study in Exodus, Leviticus, there might be rules that were put in after the fact by Babylonian-trained Pharisees. In particular, I think it's all the sacrifices. That's all right out of the Babylon religion books. Some to the letter. So I think that stuff was interjected, as Lionel says, the holy virus. So what I would do would be, then people, they don't have animal sacrifices these days, so that's not a big issue. You don't have meat sacrificed to idols. That stuff doesn't happen per se, but you might want to take a step in further and say, with our ability and diet ability to have nutrition, should we be killing animals and eating them? That's a question you might answer and go, well, Paul says in the Bible it's okay to eat meat and all that. It's not that it's okay to eat meat. It's that you realize in this life now, in this world, where we're able to make nutrition without meat healthy enough, and I'm not talking about the chemical fake meat, I'm not talking about that. Do we still need to be killing animals to eat them? See, this is the kind of idea is that this is what God wants you to do, I think. This is what I'm doing. This is what I think. And this is what I think is that He wants you to go in there and grow yourself in more righteousness. Grow yourself holy. Not being self-righteous. Hey, look at that. I fasted, 2 days, and I'm wonderful. And he talks about that using the Pharisees as an example. So if you think it's wrong to eat meat, don't eat meat. It doesn't mean you got to walk around parading on it. You don't want to lengthen your robe and your tassels on that concept, but be ready. And a quote from the New Testament, I forgot who said it. Be ready to explain yourself, to show yourself, and see why. But you have to follow it. So I'm using the word meat because it's easy for me. I don't eat meat for those reasons, right? So it's easy. So it's like I don't go like, I don't know. Well, I'll just have a quick sandwich today, a ham sandwich today. No, you don't do it. Period. You don't suffer because you don't eat it. You've come to the conclusion in your life that this is something I'm not going to do for holiness. I'm not going to steal the energy from another living being for my comfort, which is how I look at it. But if you want to get off the meat subject, you can look at it as drinking, for that matter. Don't drink strong drink. Why would you need to drink it? Well, it tastes good. Well, there's a lot of things that taste good. You don't have to have alcohol or drugs or anything like that. You don't have to because it's mind altering. So it's like, well, you can have a glass of wine. Yes, you can. A glass of wine has shown to be medicinal. How about healthy grapefruit? Is that medicinal? Is the one thing alcohol going to change anything? Maybe not. For someone it is. Some person goes, I can't do any of it because I can't handle it. Are you overweight? It's what I struggle with because I deal with stress by eating. You have to change your position so that you're not doing it. So somebody who's overweight and using food as some type of crutch or some kind of comative, stress comative. I could talk about this because I do. When you do this, you're not using God. You're using material. You're going to the materialistic world for your solution, be it drugs, food, meat, whatever it is. You're going to the materialistic solution rather than the divine solution. Well, someone could say, well, then why eat it all? Just trust God and all that. Well, supposedly there's people who have done that. I don't know. But again, it goes to the why. Are you doing it because you are motivated by the Holy Spirit in you, that this would be good for your spiritual growth or your development or your own personal holiness? That's something you might want to find out about. we are in a material world. We have to rely on materialists to a degree, but is the material what you're leading to, or is it God? You can't serve God and mammon. Mammon, I did a show back about this. I look at the word mammon. They don't even translate it half the time because it's such a special word. And when you look up the history of it, it's hard to get it down, nailed it down. But what I've come up with is mammon is materialism. You can't serve materialism and serve God because they're at odds with each other. When you're going to have a drink to take the stress off, or you have cake or whatever your thing is, and it gets worse. So what if you end up killing somebody and you start to enjoy it, or whatever, killing animals and Don Dahmer? Yeah, you start to have sexual affairs. I mean, you can just go out into bona fide big evil on that same kind of material train. And when churches do things and they build these gigantic mega churches, is that a material venture, or is that serving the Lord? By making people will come in here with the gymnasium and go, yeah, okay, but are they coming for the gymnasium, or are they coming because they want to worship God? Well, we get them in here and then we can convert them. Okay, I'm not going to judge. That person is going to have to be judged by their actions. Here's my beliefs. Here's what I did. Here's why. I live by it. I'm not, okay. I don't agree with that, so I'm not going to be involved in that. But I'm not going to tell them not to do it. This whole thing coming up with the vaccines and all that. Well, the people have to make their decisions, especially now when there's so much doubt about the whole authenticity and the reasoning for the vaccines. You don't want to do it. That's okay. For years you had the Christian Scientists and other Jehovah's Witnesses, I believe, but others, I'm not familiar, I'm not sure about that, but I know there's who they don't take blood, they won't take certain medicines because they believe it goes against their faith. And some have died because of it. So be it. Talk about living by your faith. Yeah, I've died because of that, or a child of mine has died because of this principle. Make sure that principle is true and then stick to it. If you have if you study it and you say, I don't think this is good anymore, and you can change it, then do it. But be consistent and be non-contradictions. Don't be hypocritical about it. So if you're going to get together and bind something on earth, you're hoping that you're uncovering something that is already true in heaven that might not be true or practiced or used in your circles, and that's a good thing. Make sure it doesn't cover over the basic principles of the real law that before they built upon it with all the other stuff. And then when you're doing it, are you doing it for material reasons or are you doing it for spiritual reasons? It's important. It's important to know why you do it. That's the whole point of hypocrisy. It's not what you do, it's why you do it. And when you realize what you're doing and how it really fits into God's principles, are you still going to do it, or are you going to change? That's not, when I say you're a sinner, yeah. If I was doing something that was wrong, I saw it was wrong, and I've changed, I was a sinner, go sin no more, Jesus said. Jesus didn't say, cut off your arm, whatever, you're thrust out of the kingdom now because you did this before. You saw it, you accepted the thing, and you changed. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. And the people who are going out helping your brother or sister in church and saying, yes, you've been doing this sin, or this stuff like this, you're coming to them. Are you coming to them because you're kicking butt? Are you going to come in and say, you're disgracing the Lord? And are you going to get all indignant on Jesus' case or God's case? Because he could do it himself, and he doesn't. When Jesus was in there doing this stuff, he didn't go up on a high horse. And the people have a free will to do these things. The whole point of being alive on earth is kind of to see you grow in spirituality toward God in an environment that allows you not to. In fact, it tries to, you're kind of going upstream to get away from it. If you do those things, you had with these little things, you'll be giving much more later, because the next level we're going for is going to be no limitations, or much expanded limitations. Life is indeterminate. It's eternal. In the next level, you will have the lamb and the lion will sit down together. Well, that tells me that there's going to be no more need for food in the classic sense of toiling, and what was the other word? Working and toiling. So for example, it's possible that you won't need to have material sustenance in the next level. You'll have powers of creation, perhaps. What you say, Jesus says, if you call the mountain to go here, to go there, we'll do it. Well, those powers, those principles will probably be normal there. Well, are you going to be throwing mountains around, and destroying other people's stuff? Well, if you have the proper attitudes when you're moving into that area, you can go into the kingdom, which is the next level. So it's like, this is all what I get from putting this all together. I put these together, and it's kind of like, they're kind of a three-dimensional puzzle, not a puzzle. What would it be like? You're putting these layers on itself, and it's moving around, and it's creating a new kind of principle that I can strain stuff through, and it comes out the other side. This is my mind working. Which is why I've made changes in my life on certain things I've done. I mentioned the meat. As I've ran it through these principles that I've came out with, I don't think it's right anymore. I mean, it doesn't mean someone, what about the ancient Indians and all this stuff? Well, they actually, it's funny because they actually revered the buffalo for giving up their life so they can live. They appreciated the aspect that, but now we have the ability to move around it. And again, I'm not talking about the fake meat and all the chemicals. That's not what I'm talking about. So this is how, there's if you look at my website, feettothefireradio.com, you'll see two quotes. One is from Jesus, talking about the blind leading the blind into the hole. The other one is a self-examined life. An unexamined life is not worth living, from Socrates. This is what we're supposed to do here, in my opinion. We're put in situations. We're half the time, or maybe more, they're because of our choices. Our input thrusts us in these situations. If you made a right choice, you wouldn't be there. But some of them are thrust upon us. And either way, at that point, you have to analyze what you're doing, pray, and get the guidance of what to do at that time. Right now, it saddens me to see the torture, my couple of my kids are going through, is because they have to determine, having many years and having a family and house and having pensions and all that, whether they're mandated to take the vaccine or not. Now, it's real easy. People go, I don't got to take the vaccine. Well, those people at first aren't in a position to have to, and secondly, like for example, if they're a team and one is the worker and one isn't, the one at home, the homemaker or what have you, doesn't have to. They don't have to go out in the world. Well, it's not a big decision to say. But when you're the breadwinner, male or female, and you're out there working, and it's because if you say no, you're out of a job, you lose your house, you got your family. What do? It's tough. And God, the people who are making these mandates happen are putting such a hot coal of fire over their head. The karma they're making for themselves is scary. To realize what they're going to be doing, because all those people that they have harmed by this, they're going to have to answer for that, because it's so obvious by looking at the standard medical practices, the actual data, the odds of getting ill and all this stuff, that there's no reason at all to mandate it. There isn't even a reason to do it to begin with. But let's say you want to do that, fine. If you do that, fine. You're also trusting in the humandom and its wisdom. And is it good enough? And will you get ill later on? Will it cause problems? They don't know. It's too fast. They haven't tried. It should be decades should be tested, this stuff. And the people who are testing it for them should be looked at as kind of heroes for putting their life and their livelihood on, or their quality of life on the line in testing for it. Of course, a lot of those people are down and out in money, and so they give them money, they do it, and now they're not doing it with money; they're doing it by threatening you for the loss of your livelihood. It's terrible, absolutely terrible. So right now, as we get deeper and deeper into the latter days, it gets these principles are going to become more and more and more important. Do you think it's okay to do all kinds of silly and nasty memes about Joe Biden? Do you think that's okay to do that? I don't think it's okay to do that. I mean, if the man is ill or if the man is evil, it doesn't matter. It's not okay to do that. You see what he's doing. You don't follow it. You may talk about it in the political realm. You can vote. You can talk about it. But you just don't do that. You don't go down to the lower physical nature level. You don't want to go down to them when they were calling Trump all kinds of names and yelling at him and all this stuff. So it was not good. So it's okay to do that because of the stuff that he's been doing is evil or at least bad for the country. No, this is where the sobriety of righteousness comes in. And again, how do you learn this? From running it through this mill. This is how you grow in spirituality and righteousness. I had a real sharp tongue for years. Real sarcastic. Well, I still am, but I try to do it jokingly now, but very sarcastic. I'll take the words that you say, twist them around, and stick them back down your throat. I mean, that's what literally I described it when I was in my youth. That's wrong. You could use the wit and wisdom in a positive method to bring out things that might be problems you might see. You could do it live, kind of a lightheartedness. You can do it, But the bottom line is that if people choose to do something that they want to do, right or wrong, their choice. It's when it affects you is your choice. Somebody comes into my house to do harm, their choice to do it, free will to do it. It's my free will to protect my family. If I don't want to be involved in some group or situation for reasons that I know I don't think it's good, or even I don't even want to, that's up to me. This is the beauty of the freedom of this country, which of course now is on is being taken down because tyranny doesn't want freedom. Whether it be the devil or whether it be a dictator, it doesn't matter. They don't want freedom. I don't care if you agree or not. They just want compliance. You do what I say when I say it. That's all I ask. And in the interim, I don't care what you do. But when it comes down to what I say and do, you do it. That's what the hierarchy says. And here's God, the king of the universe, let's say, and he lays down these principles, and he lays it down going, look, here's what you should do, because if you don't, you're going to be harming yourself and others. It's not, you're going to be affronting me. How dare you? I'm God, That's not how it looks at. Though some people look at it that way, and, this is where arguments get in that sometimes the God of the Old Testament might not be the same, the God the Father of Jesus. And that's another discussion. Holy virus. Go look at their, look at it there rather than use it here. But the point I'm saying is that you want to have your principles align with the true, and then it makes it simple. Jesus made it very simple. That's why it's amazing. The Jesus teachings are so great because it's so simple. They're hard if they don't line up to your carnal part of you, the physical part of you. And this is where the going for mammon or God, the material or God. And so this is where I'm learning on. I'm reading a book now. It's like, it's really, really interesting about the earliest Christians in the first couple hundred years that were eventually ruled heretics and their writings were destroyed, but the writings exist only because of the critics who were quoting them. And it's pretty good stuff what they did. I'm like going, I don't know. I mean, to me, it looks like the church made the wrong turn. I know it doesn't take a great scholar to say that because of all the history of killing and we're going to take back Jerusalem from the Muslims back to the Christians, and they kind of lose their, when they're getting out and they're driving down the way, let's take some land where we're here for us, and come on, this mammon talking. Plus, they were doing it because they were getting assured to go to heaven. They make fun of the Muslims with the going to heaven with the virgins. I don't really know if that's true, but this is the thing going on. Christianity did their own version of it. And it's not Christ Christianity. It was the church and these people agreeing together and doing these things. And this is why you have a a double-edged sword. You have the ability to do it. You have the right, let's say, to do it. But is it right? And this is where you have to kind of put all these together. You can't just look at Peter and go, well, Peter, the first pope, the pope has the right. He can say this stuff. You're taking that out of context and you're making your own history with it. That's not the case. The principle has to be precept upon precept. I think it was written, the idea of it, and that's where it comes down. So I think I'll stop there because I get too long-winded and, nobody's going to listen to the end. So, but that's why I hope to get that across because, yeah, you got the right to bind stuff. If you're doing the right job, it's being revealed on here. It's already up there. It's nothing new. You're just putting it into our context, something that already existed. If it's wrong, it'll conflict with one of the principles that Jesus taught, which actually echoes back to the beginning. And then you have to adjust it to do it, and then you have to follow it. You have to be now, if it's wrong and you follow it, there's a problem too. Hypocrisy is not just saying to do this and then not doing it. It's you're not supposed to do this or you shouldn't do this, but you're doing it too. You're still a hypocrisy. So, all right, I hope they put that together right. Made sense. So I'm going to call it an evening and get ready for another fun week on the road. God bless you all. And I talked with Richard Allen Miller. I should have said this in the beginning. And it looks like we were going to do a show next week. He's in not good shape. He's been through COVID, and he's not feeling well. He's got a book to do. He's being thrown out of his house because they're selling the house. He was renting it. A lot of stuff going on here. So we'll have him on and tell how you can get his book. You can look up Richard Allen Miller on Facebook if you have it. And anyway, I'll put all this. We'll talk about it next week. But for now, God bless and hang in there because it's tough times out there, and you got to knuckle down, nose down into the principles of Jesus and listen because we're going to really need them in coming times. So God bless and I'll see you later.
Retell your timeless truths. Oh, it's your word. Feet to Fire is a production of IPS Media Works on the OnSync Radio network of stations.